All episodes of the Real Women in Business podcast reflect the opinions and views of the guest and cast McCrory and do not reflect official policy or position of employers or clients. Thank you.
You're listening to the Real Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Cass McCrory, and in this podcast, we highlight women in all kinds of businesses. For yourself, someone else, full-time, part-time, overtime hustle, together we will learn from and with one another. And if we get it right, it'll lift us all. Let's get into it.
Friends, I am really excited to be popping in with a special episode on a Thursday. I've never done this before, but Hazel and I literally just recorded this episode, and I know somebody needs to hear this message. So we're going to just post it live right away, because why are we holding back in life? And Hazel brought so much greatness in this episode about mindset and the questions that we need to be asking. She brings out this one thing that her work as a cognitive hypnotherapist generates, which is her work convinces the mind to release the problem, to accept the solution instead. And we're going to give you some really specific questions to help you kind of build what that solution looks like. It's a download on the website. You can go to realwomeninbusiness.com/Hazel, HAZEL, Gale, and download that worksheet. Pull over on the side of the road. Do not listen to this one while actively driving, please. Or if you do, plan on listening to it again. We'll get right into the show. Hazel, welcome to the show.
Hi.
I'm so glad to have you on today. You were somebody that another guest referred.
Fantastic.
And so I'm really curious for you to share with the listeners here what it is you get to do in this world.
So my background is in sport. I was competing as a boxer and kickboxer for around a decade. And during that time, I experienced some massive highs and lows, and the lows were particularly difficult. I burnt out after having just really set myself up with the worst mindset ever for a long period of time. I was overtraining, over dieting, because of course any fight sports have weight categories, so you need to be at the lowest weight possible. And it's very, very easy to get into an overachiever mindset about dieting and essentially starve yourself. I went through a range of different eating disorders and ended up on the sofa feeling like I could barely speak, let alone get into a ring and guard myself from punches to the face. So I was forced to take some time off, and it was really, really hard for me, because my self-worth was all based on achieving and winning and being strong and being impressive, and that had been like that for a long time. And I'd only started fighting in the middle of my 20s, but it felt like a homecoming, because I had always been this sort of quite aggressive, athletic, strong person that just placed far too much value on those things. And so being forced to stop when I was already competing as a fighter was like a death. And I refused to accept it for a very long time, jumping back into training way too quickly than would be healthy, and eventually had to take a look at where I was going wrong. The first thing I did, of course, was look for all the miracle cures. I went to every doctor and practitioner I could find to fix me, like desperate to find the one person with the magic wand that was going to be able to just make me better and get me back to form without me having to do anything, which of course didn't exist. And eventually I had to concede that there maybe was something wrong with what I was doing. Maybe my mindset was a little bit wrong. And so I went through a few different therapy styles, and the one that really helped me was cognitive hypnotherapy. And I found the change to my life was so powerful. I'm not saying it was a big dramatic switch. There was no magic wand. It was a process of work, but it completely changed my value system, the way I thought about myself, the way I connected with other people, the sense of purpose I had in my life. And because of this, I felt inspired to train up as a therapist, and I now practice in London full-time, and also write. I published my first book on this stuff last year. And so my world now, I've swapped punching people in the face for hopefully helping people to feel better about themselves. And I can say that it's a very welcome change.
That's quite the leap.
Yeah. Yeah.
In this podcast, we talk about whole life. So I'd love to know who you are outside of the work.
Well, work is a lot of my life. I'm lucky enough to have found work that I enjoy enough to not really think that I need this work-life balance that people talk about a lot. But outside of work, I guess I think the first thing that popped into my head was a board game fanatic. I don't know.
Ah, nice.
How cool that makes me sound, but I do love, that's my go-to guy for social life is a games night with a really nice Deliveroo. I'm also really interested in creativity. So my degree back in the day, 20 years ago, was in fine art, and I focused on photography and film installations, and I still keep that stuff alive. I also occasionally write music, and I sing and play guitar, not particularly well, but I love to do those things. I still train. I still coach as a boxing coach as well, and I still train a bit there, but I've left competition far behind, and I'm a lot less aggressive with it these days.
I'm interested. I'm also a huge board game fanatic. We had built-ins created in our house to hold all of our board games because it is just it's almost overwhelming. What games are you playing these days that you're just like, this is a great game?
Okay, so I just came back from a long weekend with my mother. We played approximately 20 games of Settlers of Catan together. So that's at the top of the list. Also, Seven Wonders and a classic. I just love a bit of Trivial Pursuit.
Nice. My husband is a Stratego fanatic.
Uh-huh.
So we'll play some Stratego. We have little kids. So now my daughter, who's 11, is getting really into it. So they've been playing things like Guillotine, which is a very fun card game, and Sushi Go and Exploding Kittens. Like the just expanse of card-based games that have come out. It's so much fun.
And it's really, really, there are loads of psychological benefits. If you've come across the book SuperBetter by Jane McGunigal, I think it's Jane. I can't remember. There's two sisters. One of them's Jane, and hopefully I'm right. No, it's I can't remember, either Kelly or Jane McGunigal. And she recovered from really bad head trauma. But she was a gamer. She was I think she was writing online digital games, and she's written this whole book about gameful qualities, the qualities in us that we all have that draw us to games, and how to increase these things to apply to everyday life challenges. Because games, they make you, give you the ability to fail and to try again. They encourage you to connect with other people as teammates. I can't remember the list. I mean, she's written a 400-page book on this, so I'm not going to try and summarize it here. But it's really interesting because so many people think of gaming as either a waste of time or an isolating negative practice. But actually, although that does happen to some people because they use it in the wrong way, if you use it in the right way, it can be enormously healthy.
I'm a big fan of that. We love playing games at our house, and I was actually at an event with this woman, Liz, who writes for HBR. She's brilliant. And she shared this one tip with me and she called it the big mommy rule. So that as you're playing with people that don't know how to play a game, and as you're teaching them how to be in a space of winning and losing and being okay with that, the big mommy rule in her house was you can change the rules of the game 3 times in any playing of the game. And there's like this boundary, this container for adaptation to happen, especially with kids and with people that are new to playing a game, so that they feel like they have some constraints, but they also have a lot of opportunity. And I just love that so much. I'm going to link to Liz so that people can check this out more. Hopefully she'll write about it. But it was just such a thoughtful way of saying, hey, playing a game, it does have this set of rules that you play within, but there's something bigger too. It's how you play in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so glad we went down this rabbit hole of playing games. I want to talk about cognitive hypnotherapy because I have done a little bit of cognitive hypnotherapy, but I suspect for a lot of people, this is like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Tell them how you're not making people cluck around like chickens.
Yeah. That's obviously the biggest concern that people will have. I mean, the amount of times a client has asked me if I'm going to make them cluck like a chicken or swing a pocket watch in their face.
Yes.
There's a lot less than there used to be in terms of the need for myth busting, because hypnotherapy in general, and in particular cognitive hypnotherapy, are becoming much more known for what they really are. But yeah, so the sort of perception that stage hypnosis gives us is that the hypnotherapist will, in inverted commas, put you under and take control of your brain and make these suggestions that will work their way into your psyche and change the person that you are. And no wonder people find that frightening. I wouldn't be too interested in turning up for something like that. But it's not that at all. I mean, no hypnotherapist, no matter how skilled they are, can make a suggestion that you're not willing to accept. But it's not really all about suggestions. So cognitive hypnotherapy combines traditional hypnotherapy, which is this suggestion part of the process, with a whole host of other techniques and processes from different styles of therapy, including sort of counseling type styles of therapy, Gestalt therapy, positive psychology, and new findings from neuroscience, and then also NLP and a load of other talk-based therapies like CBT. And so what you get is this amalgamation of different approaches, and it means you can work very differently with different clients. Some clients will be wanting to be extremely logical and to think logically about their thought patterns, break them and changing their habits. And other clients will be more interested in working with sort of creative visualization or metaphor, and there's space for all of it. And so really it's just a conversation that you have with someone, two heads coming together to work out A, what the problem is, B, what the solution would look like, which is vital and something that people don't consider very often, and then C, how we can work together to convince the mind to let go of the problem and accept the solution instead. It will involve lots of things like memory reframing, tasks that can be used in the moment, mindfulness techniques, and creative ways of communicating with the unconscious mind, because the conscious and unconscious mind have two very different ways of thinking. Conscious mind likes logic and reasoning. The unconscious mind likes imagery, emotion, metaphor, and symbolism. And so you need to find a way of logically thinking about the solution and then communicating that in a way that the unconscious mind will listen to. And that's the creative part of the therapy. And that, for me, was what made it so fascinating and exciting when I first came across it as a client. And still now, almost 10 years into my practice, there's nothing better than working with a client in that creative way to solve a problem.
I want to just underline something that you said, because I think this was perhaps the best articulation of this, the output that I've ever heard on cognitive hypnotherapy. It's convincing the mind to release the problem so it can accept the solution instead. That's brilliant. I mean, I'm so glad that you framed that for people in that way, because it can be so many things, but at the end of the day, if you have a problem, you are looking for a solution. And if your brain is just hooked in a million different ways around the problem, you will just stay in the problem.
Absolutely. And if we all do this, even though we don't realize it, if somebody comes into a session with anxiety, the first question I pretty much always ask a client is, what would you like to get out of this process? Mm-hmm. You ask somebody with anxiety what they want to get out of the process. They say, I want to be less anxious. Or I want to get rid of my anxiety. You ask somebody with a binge eating problem what they want to get out of the process. They'll say they want to eat less. They want to stop binging. Everyone focuses on an absence of the problem, but they don't ask the question of what needs to fill that absence. You can't just remove a massive part of your life and not consider what's going to plug the gap. So a big part of session number 1 for me is accurately mapping what we call the solution state. So if somebody came along and magically removed binge eating or anxiety from your brain, like, how would you know that it had worked? What would fill the space? And people tend to the most common response to that question is, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Because we focus so much on the problem because our minds think we need to focus on the problem in order to get rid of it. But it's in practice, it's absolutely the opposite that we need to do.
I know my listener, and right now she is either pulled over on the side of the road or she's on a train commuting, and she's saying, yes, I need this. What do you suggest people do next?
But in a self-help sense, what I would really like people to do, and this would be true even if they were going to book in a session with someone, because having this information beforehand would be perfect. You want to think about this solution state on different levels. You want to think about the different environments that you would find yourself in. So if the problem were gone, where would I find myself going? Who would I find myself talking to? What kind of thoughts would pass through my brain that can't at the moment? What kind of feelings would I feel in my body? Excitement, love, connection, that I can't at the moment. And then you want to go up a level from that and think about your behaviors. What would I find myself doing if this problem wasn't here? Perhaps it would be something simple like standing up taller when I'm in a meeting, or eating more healthily. And then you can go up a level from that as well to capability. What skills would I be developing if this problem were gone? Would I be getting better at speaking articulately? Would I be getting better at speaking confidently? Would I be getting better at the particular skills in my job? What kind of growth is made possible by this change? You can go even higher than that. You can look into values and beliefs systems. What would I find more important if this problem were gone? If my anxiety problem were gone, maybe I'd find connection and social life more important. Maybe I'd find it more important to spend time with my family and loved ones. What am I making space for here in terms of values? And then the very big question, two very big questions at the top of that. One we could possibly look at a little more in detail. So the first one is, who would I be? When we have a problem like anxiety, and when we've been with that problem for years, even decades, it forms part of our identity. We think of ourselves as a shy person, an anxious person, a timid person. And we're allowing these to be, we're basically wearing these as signs when we're walking into places because they've assumed them as part of our identity. So without the anxiety or binge eating or whatever the problem is, what kind of person am I looking forward to being? Am I going to be a more creative person? Am I going to be a more assertive person? And then the really big question that you can consider after all of these things is, what would be my purpose? What would bring me meaning and purpose to my life? What will I be free to focus on in terms of meaning and purpose as a result of moving beyond this issue? And so you can see when I'm asking these questions that all of these give so much more energy and attention to the solution rather than the problem. It's no longer about getting rid of that one little block. It's actually about not amalgamating, it's not the word I was looking for, alchemizing it. It's taking the problem, turning it into part of the solution, turning it into a gateway to change, because it's only by having the problem that we even get to really think about these questions in detail.
Those questions were so powerful. I'm going to say you and I together will work on creating a worksheet, and we'll put it up at realwomeninbusiness.com/Hazel Gale. All of the show notes and a worksheet to download those questions will be on the website, because I'm sure people are like, I need to listen to that 16 times to write down all of those questions, because I think I barely got them. But those are a powerful questions. And you've been through this process yourself and found that who you were outside of competitive kickboxing created space for this work to come into being.
Yeah, I needed the crash. And I know it's a cliched story, the whole sort of fallen hero story. It comes up all the time because it is how things happen for people very often. But I needed that crash in order to ask the difficult questions of myself. First, along the lines of facing my fears and my shame. I had massive amounts of shame around appearing weak, or getting something horribly wrong. And I felt this shame physically, like a rising dread in my body at the prospect of any big challenge, any possibility where I could look like a fool or look feeble, vulnerable, penetrable. And I had to face all of that. I had to go there. I literally had to crash into it first, and then I had to look it in the eye before I had a chance of moving beyond it. But doing so opened up all of those areas I just spoke about, and it connected me to a far, far more meaningful purpose that I'd been completely blocked from, which was to use all of this to help people in any way possible, to have the sort of emotional aha moments that can help them make the same sort of shift that I did, hopefully without a complete burnout, because we don't need the rock bottom to make this change. We just need some highs and lows. We don't all have to actually find ourselves on the sofa staring into nothing for days. And And so that became my purpose. And I can now, the beautiful thing about connecting in with a purpose like that is I actually have a statement for my purpose, which I put together with a really great exercise that I'm thinking of doing an Instagram live on at some point soon. The statement for my purpose is to communicate the emotional aha moments that bring about self-acceptance and empathy. So there's this means I can apply that to anything that I do, whether I'm writing a song, writing a book, writing an article, if I'm having a conversation with someone, if I'm conducting work with a client, a talk, a workshop. That sense of purpose is present for all of it. And I know as long as it's there, that I can get into a state of flow with it that carries me through the work. It adds energy rather than making my work feel like a drag or a drain or overwhelming, which is why I said earlier on that I'm lucky enough to have found work that doesn't mean that I need to think about this work-life balance thing that people talk about all the time. I hate the concept of work-life balance because it implies that work isn't life and that we need to add some extra life around work in order to be well. What if our work is a part of life and we can actually create it in a way that means that it is inspiring to a state of well-being? That's surely the ultimate goal, not to counteract it with fun and weekends drinking or, city breaks. So yeah, purpose was the key thing to have come out of this for me. And I'm not saying it was a quick thing. It was a long process, but I'm very, very glad that I've landed with it.
I'm kind of gobsmacked. Like, I feel really like, oh yeah, like that is a really, in so many of the episodes that we've had with women, there's an element of getting through.
Right.
And there's a need for work-life balance when the work doesn't feel in alignment with the person's purpose.
Yeah.
And I can be completely transparent because I don't care to carry a lot of shame about this, but some of my work right now doesn't feel great. And it does continue because I have to pay the mortgage and I have a team. And like, there are things that have been brought up that necessitate me looking at it from a work-life balance standpoint, because I don't love all of the work. Some of the work, this work, please, it is my jam. I completely related to that thing that you were saying about how the energy flows into me because I'm in a state of flow. I feel that. But I also have to do the work that pays the bills. I don't even know how to ask this, but like, how do I take this knowledge now? Because I see it, and shift things.
I mean, yeah, okay. I understand why you find it hard to ask the question, because it is a really hard question to answer as well. I mean, okay, a bit of realism, yet no one's going to be able to wake up tomorrow morning and change everything so dramatically that they suddenly have a job that they love 100% of the time. And also, I'm not suggesting that I'm in that flow state 100% of the time with my work, but I have made sure that every facet of my work at least has the potential to provide that kind of purpose and flow. So yeah, I mean,
I think that's a really important distinction, because I think that sometimes we see people, and like this podcast is a great example, we see women operating in a very high level, doing work that they love, and we hear them talking about the love that they have for the work. And I love how you just framed it as it has the potential. It doesn't mean that it's always living up to that potential. So if you're currently in a dip where the work is not meeting its potential, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong, and you don't need some like 360-degree life change.
Yeah, but all those dips, those lulls, I just think that nobody's going to live a life full of positive emotions and never experience the negative ones. And we do live in a culture that seems to tout the possibility of 100% positivity. And that is, harmful. Well, I think we have a duty to ourselves not to try and nuke the bad days or nuke the lulls, but to read them as signposts and calls to action. If we're just having one bad day, then sure, deal with it, get past it. Hopefully tomorrow will be better. But if we're in a lull and something just doesn't feel right, then that is our body-mind system communicating to us that there's something that we need to address. Maybe we're overstepping a boundary somewhere. Maybe we're letting somebody else overstep a boundary. Maybe we are working ourselves too hard. Maybe we aren't getting enough sleep. Whatever. It could be a million different messages. If we don't listen to those negative emotions as calls to action, then we never hear the message and we don't make the change. So while I agree that we should, it doesn't mean that we need to make a big 360-degree life change, we should all definitely be listening with curiosity to those experiences, because sometimes it's just a small change. It's just a thing we haven't said because it's awkward, or a job that we haven't got out of the way that's looming over us because it's going to be a bit boring, like the tax return or something like that. I'm never going to be able to say that I get purpose out of doing my tax return. I'm just, and it's a thing that I have to do. Having said that, I have set up situations in my life. I hate the boring work stuff. I hate admin. I hate boredom. I'm a real variety and novelty person. And this was what I was thinking when you asked me this question earlier on. And I'm so about variety that I'm now answering your one question with about 5 answers in one go. But I've set up a situation where I've got a PA and I've got an accountant. It takes a lot of the crappy work off my hands. And I did that before I was, I was about to say before I was rolling in money. I'm not rolling in money now. But I didn't have a load of, spare cash to do that. But I decided that it was a fair payoff to take that horrible, mind-numbing work off my hands. And then the other thing I was about to say is that the way I think I've got this to happen, this purposeful or potential purpose full work options life that I have, the way I've got this to happen is that I don't stick with things once I start to feel bored. And I think there's a lot of pressure on people to have a career, in capital letters, that they start out, they do their degree in it, and then they move on to the entry-level jobs and they stick with it for decades. And that's how you become an expert, as if becoming an expert is going to bring us eternal happiness. I just don't think this is a healthy way of living our lives. And for me, I've been in lots of very diverse careers. I mean, the average amount of time I spend in any profession, not even just a job, but a profession, is around 7 or 8 years. I was a singer. I was a jazz singer in Norwich for a little while, and then I went and did my art degree. I came out of my art degree doing a few exhibitions, and I set up a graphic design company with a friend of mine. Then I got into kickboxing. I became a personal trainer to fund that. Then I had my crash, and I found therapy, and I worked in a private practice for sort of 5 years. And then I started writing my book, and I was working as that. And now I'm moving into the next thing, which may or may not involve an MSc in the psychology of creativity, because that's what I'm looking at right now. May or may not. But lots of people, my sister every now and then goes, "Oh, Hazel, please stick at this one," as if it's a great failure of mine to leave one job behind and move into the next one. But I think it's my greatest strength. I think I saw a TED talk once that talks about this pattern and calls us serial enthusiasts. And I love that term. That's exactly it. I'm not going to stay in a job once I find it boring. And with something, with lots of jobs, it's unethical to do so anyway. If we aren't engaged with our work, then we're not going to be giving the best our best capacity to it. So yeah, I say that let go of obviously let go of the fear of failure in terms of moving on from one thing to another. Believe in your ability to grow and be good at whatever it is that you fancy, because if you've got a spark for something, I would pretty much bank on the fact that you're going to be pretty good at it.
That is a powerful belief that you've just given us all to hold on to for ourselves too.
I hope so.
I feel so many feelings right now, in that there are signposts for us. And the listening to those signposts is critical. And when we don't listen to them in the day-to-day, when we ignore that reroute that pops up on Google Maps and we keep on ignoring it, that's when we hit lower lows and bigger bottoms.
Yeah. And it's not just emotions, it's our behavior too. If
Yeah.
people, my book is about self-sabotage, and that includes sort of emotional self-sabotages like anxiety attacks, and also behavioral ones like comfort eating, binge drinking, nail biting, whatever. If we've got a repetitive habit that keeps playing out, then again, that's a message that we are not hearing. There'll be a lesson within it somewhere. My book's called The Mind Monster Solution, and mind monsters are these sort of negative aspects of the, not negative, they're aspects of the personality that hold on to our fears and our doubts and our shame. And if we just keep playing into their hands, they get bigger and more powerful, and we feed the fear and the shame. But if we choose to look at them slightly differently, and if you sort of visualize the word monster in front of you right now, M-O-N-S-T-E-R, if you choose to look at it differently, what you have there are not one big problem. It's a number of lessons. They're mentors, and that's an anagram of monster. Swap the letters around in the word monster and you get mentors. If we listen to our experience, if we listen to this repetitively, if we do something like drink, then it's almost certainly our mind telling us that we are lacking somewhere. We're lacking in something like connection or variety or excitement or change, any of these things. They would be the top of my list. It could be that we're lacking in safety. It could be that we're lacking in love and connection. And so if we listen to these behaviors as well as our feelings with a curious, creative mind, we'll turn them into lessons that once we learn them, will move us forward and beyond the problem. Self-sabotage ceases to be self-sabotage when it picks up a meaning and it becomes this thing that you can alchemize into change.
Alchemizing self-sabotage into change.
Yeah.
That is the goodness.
Yeah.
And it is just a reframe, very similar to how you look at monster and mentors.
Exactly.
It's a teacher.
Yeah. Every challenging experience, every painful moment, every bump, every bruise is there to teach us about our limits. Physical ones are there to teach us about, the limits of our physical body. Emotional ones are there to teach us about the limits of our values, our needs, where our boundaries are. If we listen to the pain, then we learn who we are and which direction we want to go in.
I think that there's a lot of people that need this episode right now. I've never done this before, but we're going to publish this episode today.
Okay, wow, okay.
I'm going to figure out how to pull that off. So it's September 5th. We're going to publish this guide today because somebody needs this and they need to know that how they've seen their negativity, how they've seen their issues is some like a cross to bear. It actually is your teacher and you're here to learn from it. And I don't want them to give up on the learning. So we're going to do that today.
Okay, definitely.
I'm so grateful for this conversation, Hazel.
You're very welcome.
Is there anything that I'm totally crying. I don't know why I feel so emotional. I'm sure you have this all of the time because I know in hypnotherapy and cognitive hypnotherapy in particular, you reveal things in the conversation, in the work that does kind of bring you to your knees of understanding yourself as a soul.
Yeah.
So I bet you see a lot of tears. I bet you go to Costco to buy the tissue boxes.
Tears are good. One of the most beautiful messages of all. The meaning, like tears. I used to never cry. I never cried really at anything when I was still in this striving, fighting, be strong mindset. Nowadays, I will cry at the drop of a hat. Yeah, and Yellow Pages adverts, any film, happy or sad, a moment of meaning, of witnessing some kind of random act of kindness. My partner looks over at me with sort of raised eyebrows every single time. He stopped to anticipate it now. He's like, oh, should be going at this. I love it. I love those things. It's not boo-hoo sadness tears. They're just tears of meaning. And I can't think of anything better.
Beautiful. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about today that we haven't gotten to?
Well, I was thinking, I think I was saying this to you before we started recording, that for anyone who wants to be part of a workshop, I've got one going live I think it's going live in October. We'll put the details about this below the notes here when I have them.
Yeah, we'll do another separate post on social media. So if you're following on Instagram at Real Women in Business or on Facebook or LinkedIn, we'll promote this event again as we get closer to it too.
Yeah. And it's an event for women primarily, and it's particularly for women who struggle with stuff around fertility, or who have struggled with fertility so much that they don't have children of their own when they'd like them. The workshop is an online retreat with a number of different therapists. It's called Empowered Childlessness. But the workshops involved in it are really diverse. My workshop barely mentions fertility or childlessness at any stage, but it tackles what we've been talking about here, because self-sabotage is something that obviously becomes far more likely to happen when you're in a state of distress or under a load of pressure, which applies enormously to anyone going through IVF or anything like that. So I've done a really creative 1-hour workshop with a woman called Helen Siegel, who's putting that retreat together. And so I would love for anyone listening to this to join us on there. It's totally free, and you can have access to all of these different therapists and their advice, whether or not you're struggling with this stuff. I'm sure it will be beneficial.
Awesome. All right. I'm just so grateful. Hazel, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
All right. Well, we're going to publish this live today. And if anybody has any questions, where can they find you online?
My Instagram is at hazel.gale.therapy. I've got a Facebook group too, which is called The Mind Monster Solution, which is the name of my book. And my website is at hazelgale.com.
All of this and all of the things that we talked about are going to be in the show notes today. And we'll see you in the next episode. Hazel, again, thank you.
Thank you.